Just so we're clear from the outset, when we talk about the modern workplace, what I don't want to talk about, what we're not going to talk about is a desktop on your computer, ergonomic standards, or anything like that. I want to talk about today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what employers are thinking and what the modern workplace in the broadest sense looks like and where it's going. Okay? And start off, several months back, Microsoft got a new CEO. Any of you see that? New CEO for Microsoft. Bomber stepped down. And the new guy who came in was not what the world expected. But anyway, he issued, the first day out, he sent a letter to the employees at large, laying out his vision, laying out what he thought Microsoft's challenges were for the next several years. And one of the things that he said that really stuck out, that was widely noted, was he said, our industry does not respect tradition. It respects only innovation. All right? And while he's talking about Microsoft and he's talking about the high-tech industry, this is really true for employers at large, right? We're into an entirely new paradigm of work. We're seeing a shift from jobs where you were hired, you stayed with a company for a long time, and then retired, got a silver watch, and moved on. All sectors. And that is that the world has changed. The employee-employer relationship has changed. What you as an employee are looking for, or should be looking for, and what an employer are looking for are now different. They've changed, and they've changed pretty dramatically. Reid Hoffman, how many of you anybody take the LinkedIn course this morning with Melissa? Okay. Reid Hoffman's the co-founder and the CEO of LinkedIn, and he's somebody who really understands the modern workplace. He notes that the modern paradigm of a climb up a stable career ladder is dead and gone. No career is a sure thing anymore. The uncertain, rapidly changing conditions in which entrepreneurs start companies is now what it's like for all of us fashioning a career. Okay? Therefore, you should approach career strategy the same way an entrepreneur approaches starting a business. All right? And if you were going to start a business, would you have a website if you're going to start a business today? Do you have one for yourself? Are you on LinkedIn? Right? If you're not, you got to start thinking about it as a business. You got to market yourself. You're your CEO and your chief marketing officer as well. All right? So anyway, if we look at what's gone on in the changes over the last 20 years with the bringing in the digital age, commerce is reshaped. We have new forms of work, new forms of labor, and there's all kinds of new economics. Right? If you were in a business class 30 years ago and walked into the professor and said, I'm going to have a service and I'm going to give it away for free and I'm going to make a lot of money, the professor would probably show you the door and say, pick up your F on the way out, right? But that's exactly what Gmail and LinkedIn and Facebook and all these things have done, right? And they've turned it on their head. And if one of the things you'll hear often is when you take a service, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, right? And when you're in cyberspace, in some ways you are. In LinkedIn, you're the product. You're kind of selling yourself, but LinkedIn is using you to connect you with other people as well, right? Okay. The information economy requires less labor and less capital. You have a couple servers and a couple computers, you're good to go, right? You can call Amazon Web Services and rent cloud space. You can call Amazon Web Services at 9:30 in the morning, and by noon, you're set with a business. You can have credit card readers and all that stuff, and you're good to go, right? There's a huge shift in the skills that the workplace is demanding, right? And for better or worse, the one thing about the digital age so far is it's left the middle class not as good as when the digital age started, right? There have been some challenges there, right? Which a lot of us see. We see it, you read it in the paper every day. So we want to talk about some of the things that are driving this. So what's going on today? If we look at historical economies, right? If this was to scale, this would go back to probably the Mexican border. But from the time we crawled out of the primordial soup until about 8,000 BC, we were hunter-gatherers, right? We went out and you ate what you killed. If you didn't kill, you didn't eat. It's pretty simple, right? But it's every man or woman for his or herself. Right? Somewhere, and they figure it's around 8,000 BC, we figured out that we can farm. We can actually stay in the same place, plot it down. And if we've got 5 people aggressively farming, and we're a group of 50, the other 45 are kind of free to do what they want to do, right? So what happened here is, if you want to phrase it a different way, it's, hey, 5 of us have some work to do. The other 45 of you go find something to do, right? If you want to eat meat, that's fine, but we're going to be able to feed you, right? Not everybody's going to have to do it. So what happened is you all of a sudden had a surplus of workers, free time. That stayed when you hit the industrial age. All of a sudden, we don't need everybody making widgets. We've got machines, we've got steam engines, we've got a bunch of things that are going to help us do this. So now all of a sudden here, you have a surplus of workers again. Hey guys, we don't need a lot of you. Go figure out what to do. Well, these periods of go figure out what to do really are very dynamic. You get a lot of interesting things created. You're leveraging what it is. You're leveraging free time. So the industrial age lasts, and then we get into, pick it, the 60s, the 70s. We get to the information age, right? And when we get to the information age, what happens? Same thing repeats, where there's much less focus, as Carlene's slide this morning noted, less focus is on goods and more focus on services, right? Well, with technology, with communication, with transportation, you need fewer people to provide the same or more level of services, right? Well, then you have the knowledge age. Now we have the sharing age with Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, all these things, right? So what you're having here is that in the last 30 years, we've had a bunch of these stack up. A bunch of these cases where it's, hey, we don't, a few of us can do a lot of this work, right? A lot of the inventions that have come in, computers, cameras. I mean, think about what cameras did to companies like Kodak. Kodak used to have 140,000 people, 140,000 employees. They're now in bankruptcy, right? If you add up all the employees for Google, for Snapchat, for Facebook and all that, you don't even come close to 140,000 employees. So what you have is that we're in this period now where what do employers want? Well, employers are searching for, as they're creating business models, they're creating something new, they're looking for different skill sets. And those skill sets are still being determined. And that's what today's workers are trying to figure out. So what are employers thinking? If we go back to 1962, the vice president of the HR department at GE said maximizing employee security is a prime company goal, right? When they hired you, we were going to bring you in, we're going to have you here for 30 years. If everything works out, we've got an agreement with you, you've got a relationship with us, we're good to go, right? So that's 1962, that's GE. In the 90s, the CEO of Jack Welch said loyalty to a company, it's nonsense, right? And the question is he talking about that from GE's perspective or from the employee's perspective? Right? So there was a shift, and it was a shift in 30 years. From we're going to take care of our people to it's kind of every person for his or herself. Right? That's a completely different dynamic. We now know that work is changing, as Carlene mentioned. We now know that, what are we seeing? We're seeing a rise of contingent employment, which we'll talk about later. We're seeing ways to do things differently. So it's looking out for yourself, which means you're starting your own business, you're running your own business, you're treating yourself that way. Okay, businesses are now teams, they're not families. Right? There's a huge difference here. When you think of a family, what is a family? Mom, pop, kids together. You're going to be there for the lifetime. You're all together, thick or thin, good or bad. Doesn't matter what's going on. We're going to hang together, right? When you think about a team comes together to do something, to achieve a common goal, right? And the players that fit stay, and the players that don't fit move on, right? You reward some, you lose some, but you know at some point that basically everybody's going to go. There's going to be transition, right? The team is going to change, the types of players are going to change, the game is going to change, and they're going to go accordingly. This is where we are now. So when you go to get hired, as a matter of fact, Reid Hoffman at LinkedIn, they have an interesting question they ask employees that they bring in for interviews. When somebody comes in for an interview applying to work at LinkedIn, one of the questions they will ask you is, what's the job you want after you're here? Which is just, when you think about it, what is that telling you? Right. But if you go back to a team, what does a team do? I mean, ideally what we need to get to now, what's being worked through, more unconsciously than not, is that you're going to come and work for a company. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? And you move on. Because otherwise, what you have now is kind of this dance where I come in and get hired and, oh, I'm going to love you, I'm going to work for you, I'm going to be here. And you're thinking, well, for some period of time, but I'm probably going to move on. And the employer is going to say, well, who are you kidding? I know you're not going to be here forever, right? So now it's now time where the businesses are finally trying to get upfront about it. What are we going to do? How are we going to work together? How are you going to get me in my business where I want to go? How are we going to get you where you want to go on your career path, right? It's a completely different mindset, all right? But business's bottom line through all this, and this is what's changing with hyper competition, is any organization or sector that cannot find ways to do things more efficiently and reduce costs is at serious risk of failure. Is there anybody who doubts that? Is there anybody who doesn't see that today? Does that make sense to most people? Yeah? That's just the business world today, right? Hyper competition. Minimize costs, help improve efficiencies. Businesses are charged with matching labor to projects for the exact duration of need. No more, no less. In other words, what we have now with technology and the ability to look at what businesses are doing, we can find out the feast and famine periods for when we need employees, when we don't. Not only by month or by quarter, we can now do it by week and by hour, right? So you're going to get contingent employment. You're going to get employees who can come in and fill those needs when you have them, and we're not going to be paying them when they don't. And that's a fundamental shift from the way things were, right? And if, yeah?
Are you taking questions?
Sure, shoot, absolutely, no, absolutely.
Just curious, with the small amount of time people are at an organization, say they're there 2 years, 3 years, and then then they have to bring in somebody new for that position. I mean, they're losing downtime because when people go into a position, they're not productive right from the beginning. So they're going through that phase where they're paying them and they're really not getting very much from them because they're learning their job. And then if they're doing that every couple of years.
It's funny, Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google, former CEO of Google, was talking about that very point the other day, and he said we look at employees as a 5-year cycle. You bring them in the first 2 years, they're getting productive. The first 2 years, they're getting to the point where we're going to rock it out. Then there's going to be 2 years of man, that's what we hired them for. And then there's going to be a year of transition. Yeah. And that's if you're on a 5-year calendar, right? He's thinking on a 5-year calendar, but that's starting to be anticipated. But
so that's where I was thinking, like if they're seeing this as lowering costs, but it really doesn't.
But as we'll get to in a minute, what's not implicit in your question is that what was talked about earlier today, which is they're not going to hire you and train you. They're going to expect you to come in the door with the requisite skills, right? So the ramp up time, that's on your business. The getting up to speed, the having the skills, that's your time. When we hire you, we want you ready to go.
But you still have a transition.
You are, but not as much. And the other beauty is that from a business's perspective, if you hire contingent employees, and Paul hinted at it, Paul? I can't get the P right. What is it? Phil. What Phil hinted at today is there's a bunch of costs that if you're an employer and you have a contingent employee, you have somebody who's on contract, you don't have to pay workers' comp. A lot of them aren't around physically, so you don't have to give them a computer, you don't have to give them a desk, you don't have to give them staples, you don't have to, they're not going to waste time in mandatory company meetings that really are not going to help that person do his or her job, right? So the ramp-up times, that's kind of fading out. So you're really going to hire people who are going to have very short ramp-up times, right? And how many employers today, when you hire somebody, it's a lot easier to hire than fire, right? It's just a practical reality. Employment law, you don't have to deal with any of that. You have a contract, you didn't meet the terms, or it expired, and many will argue that actually provides a greater incentive for the employee to perform better, right? Because I want to renew this contract. Anyway, so if there's any doubt about what businesses are doing, last week's LA Times. Amgen stock soars to record on news of planned job cuts. No. I mean, think about it. Amgen restructuring plan that includes 2,900 job cuts, and their stock reaches an all-time high, right? Businesses responding to a need. And when you start thinking about it, when you get restructuring, part of Amgen's thing is, and when you think about what Amgen does, is they needed to find people with more up-to-date skills, which is mind-boggling, right? Same thing happened with Cisco just the other day. 8% of its workforce. They said we have to retool and get people who are up to speed. For Cisco, I mean, it's stunning. But anyway, this is what's driving business, all right? So when you get down to a business can say, can somebody do it cheaper? Can I get it on contract? Can I get it somewhere else? Can a computer do it faster? If I hire, do I have to hire an employee? Or can I hire somebody contingently, right? Again, business is amoral. They just do what they have to do to succeed, right? Interesting thing is that what are we seeing also? Is that when we look at productivity and employment over time, they've kind of mirrored each other, right? More people, more productivity. What happened in 2000? Here's where you start seeing a lot of the rise of technology, right? And what happened in 2008 and why you saw another dip in the economy in 2008 when the market collapsed, when the economy collapsed, there were a lot of employers for a long time that had recognized this and recognized that they could do better with fewer employees and adding technology, but they didn't because it was awfully hard to make the claim that I need to let people go when the company's running really well and we're making a lot of money, right? So when the market crashed or the economy crashed in late 2008, that actually gave a lot of businesses, for lack of a better term, the cover to do that. And why you're seeing now, even after recovery, you're not seeing a lot of these jobs come back. And the jobs that are coming back between 2009 and 2012, the same job, Mayor report just earlier this week, salaries are 23% lower for the same job than they were in 2009. So you're just seeing a correction. There was a correction going on, but this is what is going on in the workplace today. Where do the jobs go? We talk about technology, but let's put some numbers to it. 1.1 million secretarial jobs in the United States went poof in the 2000s, right? Telephone operators down 64%, travel agents 46%, and bookkeepers a quarter. Why? What are they replaced by? Technology, right? That's just business being smart. I mean, we have to look at it objectively. We don't like it, but it is what it is, right? And it's not just the United States alone. Europe had the same thing, right? So anyway, if you start looking at, here's a cross-section of things that a lot of us come across every day. What's the common denominator there?
Out of here.
Pardon me?
Digital, technical, online.
You're right, but can you be more specific? You're so close.
Computer chips.
All of these things and more can be found on your smartphone, right? And there's probably, I mean, that was just a list I banged out. I'm sure we can find a lot more, right? Now, when you think about that, there's a couple ways to look at this slide. First of all, wow, right? Second of all, if you bought all this stuff, how much would it cost you? Because again, you're downloading these things for free, except for the music on, actually, most of the people aren't paying for the music anyway, but. So first of all, how much have you saved? Secondly, how many jobs went poof here? Right? You can still buy a camera, you can still buy a radio, but how many people are buying GPS systems anymore? Or do you just throw your phone up on the dash and there you go, right? Yeah. Okay, so you see a lot of jobs go poof here. You see a lot of things that you're getting. Now, apply it one step further, which is how many people in the third world who are just getting a smartphone never had any of those? When the other half of the planet gets connected and has access to all of this stuff, to the information, the online education, the ability to connect and compete, what's going to happen? You're going to have more competition. We're going to have more change, right? Because the change that we're seeing now is going to accelerate even further. Human knowledge now doubles at a rate, everything we know as a culture, as a society, as a globe, doubles about every 24 months now. And by 2020, there's some estimates it'll be 72 days. And that's the time that these people are just going to get wired, and the other half of the planet, right? So what should workers know? Well, there's a new normal, right? We all know that. Anybody doubt that there's a new normal? Because if anybody's sitting waiting for the 2000s to come back the way it was before the economic collapse, it's going to be a long wait. If those of you know waiting for Godot, it's going to be that long. All right, so we've referenced, technology makes it possible for companies to manage labor as a variable input. In other words, they don't have to hire people except when they need it in a lot of ways, right? That's a fundamental shift from the way it was when we were all growing up. 65% of companies today, they've restructured. They're not going back to the way it was before, right? They're going to hire on demand. That's just a sound business decision for them, and they're responding to the pressures put on them by the market, by their stockholders, as we saw earlier with Amgen, and we saw with Cisco, right? Fortune 100 companies, contingent workers 20 to 30% today, 50% by the beginning of the next decade, right?
What did you just say?
20 to 30% today and 50% by the end of the decade. Okay? So if you're looking for work, 50% of it is going to be for this when you're the CEO of you, right? So what is contingent work? It's talked about a lot. What I want to do is just throw it up here so everybody's really clear on this, right? There's yet no universally agreed consensus on what type of work constitutes contingent work, but it's considered to be work with at least one of the following characteristics: temporary or without job security, right? And how many of us would rather have the absolute opposite of this? Right? Unfortunately, those jobs are gone. They're great to have. It's going to be part-time, which means that if you want to work full-time, what do you have to do? More than one. And it's going to be paid piecemeal. It's not going to be for unlimited duration, right? Okay, so whether a person does contingent work can be described as having a job is debatable. Carlene doesn't like the word job, and she stepped on herself this morning, and she apologized, right? Because she talks about work, right? But contingent work is usually not considered to be a career or part of a career, right? In other words, it's part of your portfolio, okay? It offers little or no opportunity for career development. So who's going to develop your career? You are. You're going to find the skills. You're going to bring the skills to the dance. That employer is going to be less interested in that ramp-up time. It still happens today, but it's going away, right? The new normal. And the new normal, we should put an asterisk by it, because the new normal keeps changing, and the new normal has got a half-life that it's shrinking. All right, businesses are investing rather than hiring. You've increased contingent workforce. This, you're seeing a transfer of higher-paying middle-class jobs to service jobs, and those salaries are coming down, right? If it can be mechanized or outsourced, it will be. More people in their 50s and 60s have to work. I mean, we could do a whole bunch on this, of what's driving this, right? And there are fewer jobs available to millennials because these people are working, right? Because I think you referenced this morning, if you think you're going to live just on Social Security, it's going to be very tough, right? All right. Part-time workers. Huge growth in part-time employment, right? And you hear some people say, oh, well, Obamacare is creating all this part-time employment. No. Nope. Obamacare's down here, right? This shift was going on. Okay. Obamacare, hey, people say it could be accelerating or exacerbating a little bit, but this was a trend that has nothing to do with Obamacare, right? That's an easy explanation for a lot of people, but it's not it, right? It certainly can impact it down the road, but that's not the driving force. All right? Changes in the workplace are structural. They're not cyclical. In other words, This is not something that's going back. It's completed. The top 10 in-demand jobs in 2010 didn't exist in 2004. My daughter is a high school senior. My youngest is a high school senior. If she were 2 years younger as a high school sophomore, when she graduates from college, 7 years, 75% of the jobs that are available to her don't exist today. So if you're in the education field, think about how you're going to prepare people for tomorrow when you don't know what it is. You're not going to educate people as much as teach them how to teach themselves. That's the future, right? Okay, employers and getting to higher ed. 48% of college grads are doing work that they don't need a college degree for. A third of the jobs in the near future will require a bachelor's degree. A third only require training, right? Mark hinted at it earlier today. The value of college is shifting dramatically. It's eroding dramatically. The former Secretary of Education under Ronald Reagan, Bill Bennett, wrote a book called Is College Worth It? And he listed 76 or 78 schools, and he says, if you can get into these 76 or 78 schools, go. After that, start thinking about it. This is a former Secretary of Education, who, by the way, has a JD and a PhD and loves education. He says, folks, you have to think about it. There's a tremendous shift going on, huge, right? What is the value of it? And why is that? Yahoo, Google, Bing. Use those. You can find out almost anything. You can know almost anything today, right? It's a quick search away. Today, it's not what you know, it's what you can do. Because anybody can know it. It's what can you do with it? What are the skills you're bringing to the dance? Right? What do you have that an employer wants? As your own business, what are you selling that the market needs? Right? Wikipedia, my favorite example of almost everything. Who writes Wikipedia? Who knows? Everybody, right? Everybody writes Wikipedia, but who's everybody? So if I'm writing or adding to the chat to the entry on government, I'm a government scholar. I'm in government. How do you know? You have no idea, right? When we were growing up, when you went and did a term paper in high school or college, where's your bibliography? Who are your sources? Who are your experts? Who are you quoting, right? Well, they've proven that Wikipedia is just as accurate as the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is why the Encyclopedia Britannica is gone, effectively, right? But who are the experts? It used to be, when Wikipedia first came out, they said, oh, you can't cite that in papers, in high school and college, because we don't know who they are. We don't know who's writing this stuff. Now you can cite Wikipedia. You just have to put the date that you pulled down the information, because it changes, right? But this is written by who? This is written by a bunch of people out there who have no names, who you don't know whether they have bona fides or not, right? They're not paid. So would the employer doesn't care that, they just want the information. This is kind of what an employer today. What have you got? What are you going to bring to the dance? Do you have it? This is it. And by the way, it took 100 million man hours to create Wikipedia the way it is today. A lot of time? That's how much time we spend watching commercials on a weekend in this country. So that's why things are going so fast, because there's a lot of people out there with a lot of free time doing a lot of stuff that's impacting the workplace. Okay, anybody can name the people in the photo today and the picture?
Karl Marx, Stalin, Lenin, I think that's Castro.
Uh-huh.
Mao Zedong.
Yep. Yep. So what is that, though?
It looks like communist insignia.
It's a communist party. Okay? Now, I love this for a couple reasons, all right? First of all, this is from a company called Threadless. Threadless was started by a couple guys in a garage, right, who decided, we're going to make T-shirts. Okay, we're going to make T-shirts. Oh, we need designs. That would help, won't it? So we're going to get designs. Well, let's just put it on the web and have people send in stuff. All right, that's a good idea. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. How do we know if they're any good? Well, let's put the designs up on the web and let people vote on them. And by the way, when they vote on them, we'll ask them whether they'd buy it or not. Right? And they say the winner is going to get 20 T-shirts to hand out to his or her friends, right? We're only going to do 5 T-shirts a month. So what they did was, from their garage, they crowdsourced the product. In other words, hey, folks, what do you want on a T-shirt? By the way, will you design it for us? Send it to us. And by the way, will you self-identify if you'll buy it for us? Buy it from us? Right? So they're R&D everything. What did they do? They sat in the garage, probably had a few beers. They're college kids. Hey, life's good, right? Okay. So they get all this stuff in. Oh, we need to make it. Well, so you find some T-shirt supplier, send the winning entry down the internet. They print it out. They do it. They ship it. You send them their address labels, and out it goes, right? These guys are doing really well. They sell out. They do 10,000 T-shirts, 5 a month, and they sell them all out. Right? What a great business model. And if you think about it, to me, the ultimate irony is Marx used to talk, those of you know your history, Marx used to talk about the reason it was all unfair was because the average man didn't own the means of production, right? That's why we were getting squashed. The irony is today you don't need to own the means of production. You rent it, right? You just rent it. So anybody can do that. Anybody can be a capitalist today. Anybody can get into business. You see examples like this all day long. This, to me, is just a great irony because just Marx, you don't need to own it. You just need to rent it. Okay, so where are the jobs? All right? You take it through. Okay, so that's what the workplace is doing. Where are the jobs? Okay, who's that? Ooh, nobody?
Is that Wayne Gretzky from here?
There you go, Wayne Gretzky.
I have very limited ability.
You can argue who the best basketball player was. You can argue who the best football player was. You can argue who the best soccer player was. But no one argues over who the best hockey player was, right? Wayne Gretzky. They asked Wayne Gretzky what made him why are you so great? Very modest guy, humble guy. He said, well, you know. His answer was, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it's been. Right? Business people all over the world quote this. Because if you're going to run a business, what are you going to do? You're going to go backwards, you're going to go forwards. Where are the jobs going to be? Well, what he does is he figures out where's the puck going to be. That's what we need to do is figure out where the jobs are going to be, right? Well, first of all, big data. We've all heard of big data, right? Everybody familiar with big data? Is there anybody who's not? If you don't, okay. Big data. From the dawn of civilization until 2003, I'll just use some numbers, okay? We created 5 exabytes of data, which is a 5 with 18 zeros after it. Bytes of data, so another bunch of data, right? By 2010, we were producing that every 24 hours. Today, we produce it about every 10 minutes, okay? There is more data. We have data coming out of our ears, okay? Luckily, we have computers that are faster and that are getting faster than the rate. They're getting faster at a rate that's faster than the rate that we're collecting data. So you put all this data into machines, and then you sift through it. You find it. You can find all kinds of weird things, right? If you drink Fiji water and have a Maytag washing machine, there's a 95% probability that you're something. What is it? A Democrat. Okay? Now, is that a cause, an effect, or is that just what it is? There's no cause and effect. If there were, the Democratic Party would be handing out water and, and giving out Maytags. But what happens is that you get this data. Some of it is extraordinarily useful. Some of it is not. Vegetarians miss fewer flights than non-vegetarians. Okay? Okay, it is. Anyway, so you can find all this data. You can also find out that before a hurricane, there's a 700% increase in demand for a product. And those of you who were here last hour, don't say it. Before a hurricane, 700% increase in a demand for a product.
Water, gas.
Strawberry Pop-Tarts, okay? So you can have all this data which, I mean, that's good for grocery stores if they know that the hurricane's coming, but you can have all kinds of data that's not useful, and you can have all kinds of data that's going to change the world. When you start putting in all the DNA stuff from humans and trying to figure out what medicine you need to fight a disease, right? When you look at being able to put in the 7,000 medical journal articles that are written every month, no physician can keep up. But the physician, you can dump it into an IBM computer that they call Watson, that actually won Jeopardy. It's been retooled for health. You dump that into a computer, it has the ability to digest that, and it can confer with the doctor on a diagnosis. So you're going to see huge advances in medicine just through big data alone. But think about that in every field that exists. All right? What you can do in mining data, that is going to tell us so much about everything. The frustration will be, of course, that we may not know why things are. We're just going to know that they are. We always want to know why. Big data is not going to tell you why. It's just going to tell you what. Okay? But this is huge, and they're projecting 1 million plus jobs in this just in the next couple of years. There's an explosion in the need for data mining. Okay, yeah?
Jim, are you familiar with the example from Target Corporation with the pregnant girl?
Yeah. We talked about that. Target, for example, found that that by looking at receipts for what you buy, when you swipe your card, they know who you are, right? They can go through and they can determine whether a woman is pregnant. And not only if she's pregnant, how far along she is. Okay? So Target went and said, okay, well, they're business people. They had a board meeting about it, and apparently it was a dicey issue, but they decided, okay, well, let's use it. So they went and they mailed coupons to people that they'd identified, right? Turned out that they were spot on. They had a problem, though, in that in Minnesota, a father went in and confronted the manager at the local Target and said, look at what you're mailing to my little girl. What are you doing? What are you trying to do? Why are you mailing? Are you trying to incent type of behavior? I've tried to raise her differently than that. And the manager was sorry, I'll call corporate, and they called corporate. 3 weeks later, the father went back and apologized and said, I'm sorry, my daughter was pregnant. A conversation at home ensued, right? So anyway, but they can know if you're the mother buying for the daughter or grandma buying for the daughter, right? You can get all kinds of stuff in data, and data mining is huge. They're using it for advertising, for product placement, for everything, for medicine, for every industry there is. Okay, so finally, what I did was, and I have this on a sheet for you to hand out, but if you start thinking about what are the jobs that are available today, right? We keep talking about, well, there's new needs, find the need, find the niche. And we say, well, go find something in healthcare. Healthcare is growing and technology are growing, right? That's nice, but I'd like to give you something a little more tangible, right? So I went to, okay, well, who would know this? So I asked AARP, right? Google AARP, what are you saying? What are you telling people for our population, right? I've got a sheet of this, and what's interesting is healthcare. When we talk about what Carly was mentioning, people are getting older, we're living longer, we're working longer. Call it what it is. New ones are cropping up all the time for people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, catering to people in their 80s and 90s. What are those, right? That's the find the opportunity, right? So as we look at what's coming down the road, it's uncertain. Right? And then, again, I'll have this list for you. I'll just leave it up for a minute so you can see what's in the financial sector. And again, they're also using Bureau of Labor Statistics as well, which I like. Leisure and hospitality. And again, these jobs all run the gamut of requiring a lot of very detailed skills to skills you can pick up in a relatively short period of time. Right? Retail. And professional business services. Those are identified by AARP, and I've got this list again for you afterwards. Okay, so the challenge for the future for the workplace is, how do you prepare people for it? Or in other words, as the CEO of your business, how do you prepare yourself for it, right? How do you prepare yourself for jobs that don't exist? To use technologies that haven't been invented?
Yeah.
And to solve problems we don't know are problems yet, right? The big question going forward for everybody is because of Google and Bing and all that, we can get answers to any of our questions, right? Getting answers to any of our questions is easy. The people who are going to be employed going forward are the people who know to ask the next question. What's the next question to ask? That's where the opportunity is, right? And that's where, all over the world, and there's a bundle of them sitting in the Silicon Valley just thinking about what's the next question. Yeah?
Just out of kind of curiosity, there's a website, a YouTube video you can go out and watch called Did You Know?
Oh, yeah.
And it's got this plus a whole bunch more.
If you,
files and statistics.
if you go to YouTube, and by the way, I'm a big advocate, it's not in this presentation. How many of you have heard of Sturgeon's Law? Okay. Sturgeon's Law, were you here last hour? Oh, okay. Sturgeon's Law, what is it? What's Sturgeon's Law?
90% is
90% of it is garbage.
90% of everything is crud. Or people say it a little more colorfully elsewhere, all right? But if 90% of everything is crud, what's the inverse? 10% isn't. And if you go to YouTube and type in something, you'll be surprised. You can find lectures given by Nobel Prize winning physicists. You can find business leaders. You can find Stanford business courses. You can find how to set up a LinkedIn page, how to put your picture on LinkedIn, how to use your iPhone, whatever. Anything you type into YouTube, right? And there's online courses, there's online Coursera, Udacity, Khan Academy. Spend some time, all right? Because we spend time, we'll blow 20 or 30 minutes doing anything these days, right? Invest 20 or 30 minutes a day into teaching yourself something, right? If you don't have something, rather than be frustrated, work through the frustration. It's on the inner tube, it's on the internet. You can find a video for how to do anything or how to learn anything, right? So, anyway, so you should approach your career with using the same approach as if you were going to start a business, right? Successful businesses find a need to create and market a need to fill it. What are you going to do, right? What's your business plan? What are the needs of the market? How are you marketing yourself? What skills do you have? What skills should you develop? And what are you waiting for? Because there's only one person who can do these things. I'll leave you with this. Alvin Toffler, the guy who wrote Future Shock, right? The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read and write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. Right? And he wrote this in the late 70s. He could see it coming. Fact is that we have to prepare ourselves for whatever the market demands. Take the skills you have. How are you going to, what's your term? Own it and... How are you going to own it, bottle it, and sell it? I'm going to steal that, by the way. Own it, bottle it, and sell it. What are you going to do to go out there and sell it? And the last thing is, and it's something that Phil mentioned this morning, when you go in for interviews, you have to be energetic. I interview people all the time. If somebody's sitting across the table, slumped down, or chewing gum, no. Oh, yes. Yeah, checking your phone. And when you send thank you notes, use proper grammar and spell the names of the people you interviewed with. Okay?
We just have a few minutes to get to the next class, but the next workshop, but I'm sure Jim will be here to...
Happy to answer any questions you have.